The morning fog clung to the trees surrounding Jia Kim's small cabin. 3 years had passed since the Modu invasion, 3 years since her father had disappeared. Jia moved slowly through her morning routine, checking her garden before the sun burned away the mist. The vegetables were doing well despite the strange weather patterns that had followed the aliens' arrival. She knelt beside her prized barberry plants, carefully pruning the red berries that would later become tea. Her father had taught her the importance of tea ceremonies, a connection to their Korean heritage that she maintained even here, in this remote corner of Washington state. A twig snapped in the forest. Jia froze. Since the ceasefire, the world lived in uneasy peace. The Modu ship still hung in the sky like dark stars, visible even during daylight. Most people had moved to underground cities for protection, but Jia had refused. Her research was too important, her modified plants possibly the key to understanding the alien biology. The fog shifted, revealing a figure at the edge of her garden. "Dad?" The word escaped her lips before she could stop it. There stood Dae Kim, exactly as she remembered him. His salt and pepper hair neatly combed, wearing his favorite blue sweater with the hole in one elbow that he always refused to let her. But Dae Kim had vanished during the first wave of attacks on Seattle. Jia stood slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. She knew better. The reports had explained how the Modu worked. They absorbed their victims somehow, taking not just their appearances, but their memories, their mannerisms. Perfect spies. It was why humans could trust no one now. The thing that looked like her father tilted its head, studying her with an unblinking stare. "Hello, Jia Sunhai Kim." The voice was perfect, but the words were wrong. Her father never used her full name. Jia took a careful step back, keeping her gardening shears low at her side. "You're not my father." The creature wearing Dae's face paused, then nodded once. "This form causes you distress. I can change it." "No," Jia said quickly. Despite everything, seeing her father's face again, even knowing it wasn't really him, made her chest ache with longing. "Keep it." "What do you want?" The alien took a single step forward, movements too smooth, too precise. "Information. Your species continues to resist integration. We seek to understand why." Integration, the polite word for extinction. The Modu didn't kill humans outright. They absorbed them, their memories and knowledge feeding the collective consciousness while their physical forms became vessels for Modu scouts. 3 options flashed through Jia's mind. Run, fight, or something else entirely. The first 2 would fail. This creature could outrun her, outfight her. But the third option? "Would you like some tea?" she asked. The alien blinked Dae's eyes, the first sign of surprise. "Tea? It's what my father would offer. A visitor. Even an unexpected one." Jia gestured toward her cabin. "If you want to understand humans, start by sharing our customs." She turned her back on the creature and walked toward her home, fighting every instinct screaming at her to run. She heard the soft footsteps following her and released a breath. She hadn't realized she was holding. Inside the cabin, Jia moved with deliberate calm. She filled her kettle and set it on the stove, then reached for the special ceramic tea set her father had given her for her 30th birthday, just months before the invasion. "This was my father's tea ceremony set," she explained as the alien settled awkwardly into a chair, watching her with unblinking attention. Tea ceremonies are important in Korean culture. They represent harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility. "You perform rituals with heated plant water," the alien stated, using her father's voice for these unfamiliar concepts. Despite everything, Jia almost smiled. "When you say it like that, it does sound strange." She selected dried barberry leaves from a small wooden box on her counter. These weren't ordinary barberries. For years, she had been modifying the plants in her garden, a botanist's answer to understanding the alien neurochemistry. Reports from captured Modu tissue had been leaked among the scientific community. Jia had been working with those findings. "Why? Do you live alone?" the alien asked. "Most humans gather in large underground settlements now." Gia arranged the leaves carefully. I'm a botanist. I study plants and their properties. I can't do that underground. This is unwise. You are vulnerable. Here, maybe, Gia admitted. But sometimes understanding is worth the risk. The kettle whistled. Gia poured the hot water over the leaves with practiced precision, watching as the liquid turned a deep reddish color. The scent of barberries filled the small kitchen. My father loved this tea, she said, setting a cup before the alien and taking one for herself. He said it cleared his thoughts. The alien lifted the cup, examining it from all angles before sniffing the steam. This is a poison attempt. Gia took a sip from her own cup. If I wanted to kill you, I wouldn't invite you inside first. That would be poor hospitality. The alien's eyes, her father's eyes, narrowed slightly. Then it raised the cup and drank deeply. Gia watched carefully. The modified barberry contained compounds that affected neural pathways. In humans, it produced a mild calming effect. In Modu biology, if her research was correct, it would do something quite different. Tell me about the war, she said quietly. Why did you come here? The alien set down the cup with too careful precision. We seek harmony. Your species represents chaos. Individuality is inefficient, dangerous. Is that why you took my father? To make us more efficient? Something flickered across the alien's face, a micro-expression that didn't belong to it, a shadow of pain that was purely Dae Kim. This form was a scientist, a communicator, valuable, knowledge. The alien's words came slower now. He resisted longer than most. Gia poured more tea, adding a slightly higher concentration of leaves this time. He would. He was stubborn that way. The alien drank again without hesitation. Its posture had softened slightly, becoming less rigid, more like how her father used to sit. What was he like? The alien asked suddenly. The original of this form, the question startled Gia. You should know. You have his memories. We have data, facts, sequences. The alien frowned, another expression that seemed more human than before. But there is context missing. Gia considered her next words carefully. The compound was working faster than she'd expected, creating confusion in the alien's neural pathways, possibly allowing her father's absorbed memories to surface more prominently. He was kind, she said simply. He believed understanding was more powerful than conflict. Every morning he made this same tea and watched the sunrise. He said we should always begin each day by acknowledging beauty. The alien's hand trembled slightly as it reached for the cup again. I remember a sunrise, over water, mountains behind. Puget Sound, Gia whispered. We lived near Seattle before the invasion. You could see Mount Rainier on clear days. The alien closed its eyes. It was beautiful. Gia refilled their cups once more. Outside, the fog had cleared, revealing a blue sky marked by the dark shapes of distant Modu ships. Inside, something even more remarkable was happening, and Sao, alien wearing her father's face, was beginning to remember what it meant to see beauty in a sunrise. And that, Gia knew, was just the beginning. Sunlight streamed through the cabin windows as Gia prepared a more formal tea ceremony. The alien sat watching her every move, still wearing her father's face, but now with a strange expression, confusion mixed with curiosity. 2 empty cups sat between them, the remains of the first batch of barberry tea. This next part is important, Gia said, arranging small wooden tools on a bamboo mat. My father taught me that the tea ceremony is not just about drinking, it is about being fully present. The alien nodded slowly. Present, in the moment. It touched her father's temple gently. There are memories of this, of sitting here, the smell of wood and tea. Gia kept her face calm despite her racing heart. The modified barberry tea was working even faster than she had hoped. The compounds were creating pathways between the alien consciousness and her father's absorbed memories, making them more than just data to be analyzed. Those are my father's memories, she said quietly. Do you understand what that means? The alien tilted its head. I access them as needed for this mission, to understand humans. But now you're experiencing them, aren't you? Not just accessing information. Gia measured dried leaves carefully, adding more of the special red barberries than before. What does it feel like? The alien was silent for a long moment. Disorganized, inefficient. Then softer, but colorful. Gia heated fresh water in, a small iron pot over a portable burner. The ritual was soothing despite the strange company. Why have you not called for help? The alien asked suddenly. Your kind fears us, hates us. You should have activated an alarm. Gia poured the hot water in careful circles over the leaves. What would happen if I did? Others would come. You would be neutralized. Killed, you mean? The alien shook its head. Not killed. Absorbed. Your knowledge added to the collective. Gia handed the alien a fresh cup of tea. This batch was stronger, with higher concentrations of the neural compounds she had spent years developing. And my father? Is he still somewhere inside the collective? The alien took the cup, inhaling the steam before answering. Individual patterns fade over time, become part of the greater harmony. Drink, Gia urged gently. It's better while hot. The alien drank deeply, then set the cup down with less precision than before. Its movements were becoming more natural, more human, more like her father. Tell me about the Modu, Gia said, pouring herself a cup of regular barberry tea from a separate pot. Where did you come from? Why Earth? The alien's eyes, her father's eyes, seemed unfocused for a moment. We come from many worlds, all connected now, all in harmony. It paused, blinking rapidly. Your world has unique biology, valuable, and destroying our cities, killing millions. Was that harmony? The alien rubbed its forehead, a gesture so like her father that Gia's throat tightened. Resistance was unexpected. Most species recognize the gift of unity quickly. Unity, Gia repeated. You mean losing yourself. Self is illusion, temporary, collection of memories that. The alien stopped, looking down at the teacup with confusion. These hands, I remember them younger, holding a small girl, teaching her to make a paper crane. Gia swallowed hard. That was me. I was 7. You, my father, spent hours teaching me to fold the paper just right. The alien touched the cup again, tracing its rim slowly. He was proud of you. This feeling. It is still here. Gia stood abruptly and walked to a small shelf. She returned with a faded photograph in a wooden frame. This was us, before. The alien took the picture carefully. It showed Gia and her father standing on a beach, Mount Rainier visible in the distance. Both were smiling, arms around each other's shoulders. This is your bond. The alien's voice had changed slightly, the cold precision giving way to something softer. Father and daughter. Yes. Gia refilled the alien's cup. In the Modu collective, do you have anything like that? Connections between individuals? The alien drank again before answering. No individuals. Only the whole. That sounds lonely. Loneliness is a flaw of separation. We are never alone. The alien set down the cup, its hand now visibly trembling. But this body remembers loneliness. After your mother died, an emptiness that could not be filled. Gia felt tears threatening but forced them back. He never stopped missing her, but he had me. Yes. The alien closed its eyes. You were his reason, his purpose. Outside, birds sang in the garden. Inside, time seemed suspended as Gia watched. The being across from her struggle between two realities, the cold collective mind of the Modu and the warm individual memories of Dae Kim. Would you like to see his workshop? Gia asked finally. It's in the back room. I've kept everything as he left it. The alien opened its eyes, and for a brief moment, Gia could almost believe her father was looking back at her. I would like that. Gia led the way to a small room at the back of the cabin. Inside, electronic equipment covered makeshift tables. Her father had been a communications engineer before the invasion, specializing in signal technology. His knowledge would have been valuable to the Modu. Perhaps that was why they had targeted him specifically. The alien moved slowly around the room, touching various tools and devices. These are familiar. You helped the resistance before you disappeared, Gia said quietly. You were working on ways to disrupt Modu communications. The alien picked up a small circuit board. Yes. This design, I remember creating this. It could interrupt the collective signal temporarily. It looked up at Gia with confusion. Why would I remember the work of my enemy? Because they're not just data points anymore, Gia explained. The T is helping you experience my father's memories more fully. You're feeling what he felt, not just knowing what he knew. The alien set down the circuit board carefully. This is dangerous. I should report back. To whom? The collective. The alien closed its eyes, concentrating. After a moment, its eyes opened again, showing surprise and confusion. I cannot connect properly. The signal is muffled. Gia nodded. That's another effect of the compounds in the T. They temporarily disrupt your connection to the hive mind. You planned this. There was no accusation in the voice, only wonder. I've been studying Modu biology for 3 years, Gia said, ever since my father disappeared. The resistance shared tissue samples, brain scans. I developed the compounds in my garden. The alien looked at her with new respect. You are not just a botanist. I'm my father's daughter. Gia smiled sadly. He taught me that understanding is the first step to peace. I want to understand what happened to him. What happened to you? The alien sat heavily in her father's old chair, rubbing its temples. There is confusion, 2 minds overlapping. The collective grows distant while his memories grow stronger. It looked up at Gia with an expression of fear that seemed entirely human. What is happening to me? You're beginning to experience individuality, Gia said gently. Maybe for the first time. It is overwhelming. Gia knelt beside the chair. I know, but you don't have to face it alone. She reached out slowly and took its hand, her father's hand. That's the other thing about being human. We help each other through the hard parts. The alien looked at their joined hands with wonder. The collective would consider this contamination dangerous. What do you consider it? The alien was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a voice that sounded more like her father than ever before, a gift I didn't know I needed. Outside, a military aircraft roared overhead, a reminder that the world was still at war. But in this small room filled with her father's things, Gia Kim and the creature wearing her father's face had found something unexpected, the first fragile bridge between 2 worlds, and it had begun with nothing more complicated than a cup of tea. Night fell over the cabin as Gia and the alien sat in her father's workshop. Hours had passed since the second cup of tea, and the changes in the alien were becoming more pronounced. Its movements were less mechanical, more natural. It held itself, like her father now, with the slight forward lean he always had when interested in a topic. Are you hungry? Gia asked, realizing they had spent the entire afternoon talking. The alien considered this. This body requires sustenance. Yes. Gia led the way back to the kitchen and began preparing a simple meal of rice and vegetables from her garden. The alien watched with increasing curiosity. I remember these smells, it said suddenly. Cooking with you when you were young. Gia stirred the vegetables in the pan. You taught me to cook when I was 12. Said a scientist should know how to feed herself properly. Scientist. The alien smiled faintly. You followed in his path, but with plants instead of signals. Different tools, same curiosity. Gia set 2 bowls on the table. He always said that understanding the natural world was the greatest adventure. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Gia noticed the alien using chopsticks perfectly without hesitation, more of her father's muscle memory emerging. "Why did you make this tea that affects me?" the alien asked finally. "For revenge?" Gia shook her head. "For answers, for connection. Maybe a little for hope." "Hope for what?" "That there might be a way forward that doesn't end with one of our species destroying the other." The alien set down its chopsticks. "The collective would find this conversation dangerous. Individual bonds weaken the whole." "Is that really true?" Gia poured more tea into cups she had brought from the other room. This batch was her strongest yet. "Or is that just what you've been told?" The alien drank deeply before answering. "It is what we know. But how can you know if you've never experienced the alternative? Never felt the strength that comes from choosing to connect rather than being forced to?" The alien's expression changed, becoming troubled. "There is conflict in these thoughts." Gia nodded encouragingly. "Tell me." "The collective teaches that before unity there was only chaos and pain. That individuality leads to suffering." The alien pressed a hand to its temple. "But these memories, his memories, they contain joy, purpose. Even in pain there was meaning." "That's being human," Gia said quietly. "We feel everything deeply, the good and the bad." The alien looked at her with her father's eyes now filled with confusion and wonder. "How do you bear it? The intensity?" "We share it." Gia reached across the table and took its hand. "That's the part I think your collective doesn't understand. Our connections aren't weakness, they're how we survive the hard parts." The alien stared at their joined hands. I don't have words for this." "Try," Gia urged gently. "Safe," the alien said finally. "Known, but not consumed. It is different from the collective." Gia smiled. "That's a good start." After dinner, they moved to the small living room. Gia added wood to the fireplace while the alien examined photographs on the walls. "Tell me about him," the alien said, pointing to a picture of her father standing on a mountain peak. "Not what I can access from memory data. Tell me how you saw him." Gia sat on the couch, patting the space beside her. The alien hesitated, then joined her, sitting with the careful posture of someone learning how to be comfortable in their own body. "He was the bravest person I knew," Gia began. "Not because he wasn't afraid, he felt fear deeply, but because he never let it stop him from doing what mattered." The fire crackled as Gia shared stories. Her father teaching her to ride a bicycle, his patience when she failed college chemistry and had to retake the class, the way he sang off key while making breakfast every Sunday morning. With each story, the alien seemed to sink deeper into the borrowed identity, not just accessing memories but experiencing them emotionally. "I remember the day you graduated," it said suddenly. "The pride. It felt like my chest would burst with it. These emotions, they're so physical." "That's what it means to be embodied," Gia explained. "We don't just think our feelings. We experience them throughout our bodies." The alien pressed a hand to its chest. His heart is beating faster now, responding to the memory. "What else do you feel?" "Sadness," the alien said, surprising both of them. "For time lost. For moments he will never see." It looked at Gia with growing distress. "Your achievements, your future, he wanted to witness them all." Tears filled Gia's eyes. "I know." "You're crying," the alien observed. Water from eyes, this is grief? "Yes." Gia wiped her cheeks. "Another very human thing." The alien touched its own face, finding it damp as well. "I am also crying. How is this possible?" The line between his memories and your experience of them is blurring. Gia poured more tea from the pot she had brought with them. The compounds affect how your neural pathways process information. Instead of just accessing data, you're reliving the experiences emotionally. The alien accepted, the cup with trembling hands. The collective would see this as infection, corruption. And what do you see it as? A long pause. Awakening. They sat in silence, watching the fire. The alien's breathing had changed, becoming deeper, more rhythmic, like someone in meditation. There was a moment, it said finally. When they took him, your father. Gia tensed. This was what she had waited 3 years to know. Tell me. We, valued his knowledge of communication systems. The plan was standard absorption, but he fought differently than others. The alien's voice had taken on a quality that was neither perfectly Modu nor perfectly her father, but something in between. Not with violence, with focus. He concentrated on a single memory while they took him, poured everything into it. What memory? Gia whispered. You, as a child. Both of you by a lake. Teaching you to skip stones on the water. The alien looked at her with tears streaming down its face. He burned it into his core consciousness so deeply that it couldn't be fully absorbed by the collective. A stubborn spark of identity that never fully integrated. Gia covered her mouth, stifling a sob. Lake Wenatchee, my 9th birthday. Yes. The alien closed its eyes. He counted each skip of the stones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, over and over. A rhythm to anchor his sense of self. Even as the rest was taken, he held on to that day. Is anything of him still? Individual consciousness cannot survive intact within the collective, the alien said gently. But that memory remained anomalous in our data. A corruption we could not eliminate. Now I understand why. It was not just information, it was love. Gia couldn't speak. All these years, she had hoped for some sign that her father had not simply vanished into the alien collective. Now she knew he had fought in his own way, keeping one perfect memory safe as an act of rebellion and love. The alien set down its empty cup. I have never experienced love before. In the collective, there is only purpose, efficiency, function. It looked at Gia with new understanding. This is your species' great power, isn't it? This is what makes humans so resistant to absorption. One of them, Gia agreed, wiping away tears. We love stubbornly. We remember fiercely. And you make tea that changes minds, the alien added with the first genuine smile she had seen on her father's borrowed face. In that moment, despite everything, Gia felt a spark of real hope. The war had always been portrayed as unwinnable. Humans were outmatched technologically, and the Modu collective seemed unstoppable. But perhaps the answer had never been about matching force with force. Perhaps it had always been about remembering what made us human, and helping the enemy remember what made them individuals before the collective took that away. We should make more tea, Gia said. I think we've only just begun. Morning sunlight streamed through the cabin windows. Gia opened her eyes, momentarily confused to find herself on the living room couch. Then she remembered. The alien, the tea, the long night of shared memories. She sat up quickly, looking around. The alien was not in the room. Hello? She called, a thread of worry in her voice. In here, came the reply from the kitchen. Gia found the alien standing at the stove, cooking eggs just as her father used to do. It turned to her with an uncertain smile. I remembered how to make breakfast, it said. The body seems to know what to do without my direction. Gia watched in amazement as the alien moved around the kitchen with increasing confidence, pouring tea and setting plates on the table. Not just mimicking her father now, but embodying him in small, unconscious ways. Did you sleep? She asked. Sitting at the table, the alien shook its head. I tried, but there was too much on processing, memories integrating, and something else. It set down a plate of eggs slightly overcooked just as her father always made them. The collective is searching for me. Gia tensed. Can they find you here? Not precisely. The T compounds continue to disrupt the connection, but they know the general area. The alien sat across from her. They will send search parties soon. Gia pushed her food around the plate, thinking, "We should leave then." "No," the alien said firmly. "Your research is here, your garden, and—" It gestured to the cabin. "His memories are strongest here." They ate in silence for a moment. Gia studied the being across from her. The changes were remarkable. In just one day, it had gone from a perfect but hollow copy of her father to something more complex. A blend of Modu precision and human warmth. "What should I call you?" she asked suddenly. "I can't keep thinking of you as the alien, or it, anymore." The question seemed to surprise the alien. It set down its fork and considered. "The collective has no individual names. We are all Modu." It touched his face gently. "But this form was Dae Kim. Would you like me to call you Dae?" Gia asked carefully. Pain flickered across his features. "No. That would dishonor his memory. I am not him, though I carry much of him now." After a moment's thought, he added, "You may call me Han." "Han," Gia repeated. "It fits you." Han nodded. "It means one in Korean. I am one now. Separated from many." After breakfast, Gia took Han to her small laboratory behind the cabin. It was a simple space, filled with plants, microscopes, and basic chemistry equipment. One wall was lined with notebooks filled with her research. "This is where I developed the T compounds," she explained, showing him her work. "I had tissue, samples from captured Modu scouts. I studied how your neural pathways differ from human ones." Han examined her notes with interest. "This is impressive work for limited resources. The Resistance has been gathering data for years. We share what we learn." Gia opened a small refrigerator and removed a vial of liquid. "This is the concentrated extract from the modified barberry plants. Much stronger than what I've given you so far." Han looked at the vial warily. "What would this do to me?" "I don't know exactly," Gia admitted. "But I believe it might help you access deeper information from the collective, things you might not consciously know." "About what?" "About the Modu, where you came from. What you really are." Gia set the vial down carefully. "The more I studied your biology, the more something seemed wrong. Your species has signs of engineering, tampering." Han frowned. "Explain." "Your neural pathways have redundancies that don't make evolutionary sense, like they were designed for control rather than developed naturally." Gia pointed to microscope slides on a nearby table. "I've been studying this for years, trying to understand." Han was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I will take the concentrated extract, but not yet. First, there is something I must show you." He led her outside to a small clearing behind the cabin. There, he bent down and pressed his hand to the ground. A shimmer appeared in the air, like heat rising from pavement on a hot day. Then suddenly a small oval device appeared, half buried in the soil. "What is that?" Gia asked, kneeling beside it. "My transport pod," Han explained. "All scouts carry them, cloaked from human detection. It contains emergency supplies and communication equipment. You planted this here yesterday?" Han nodded. "Before approaching your cabin, standard procedure." Gia felt a chill. "You were so certain you would complete your mission?" "Yes." Han's expression was troubled. "The collective does not consider failure." He touched the pod and it opened to reveal a small compartment filled with strange technology. He removed what looked like a smooth silver helmet. "This is a memory reader," he explained. "When we absorb humans, this is how we extract the information most efficiently." His hands trembled slightly. "It can also be used to view memories already absorbed." Gia took a step back. "You want to show me my father's memories?" "Not just his memories. Something I discovered during the night while trying to make sense of these new feelings." Han held the helmet carefully. "The Modu collective is not what I believed. We were not always as we are now." In the distance, a low rumble of aircraft could be heard. The war continued beyond their small sanctuary. "What do you mean?" Gia asked. The Modu were once individuals, like humans, with names, families, choices. Han's voice grew quieter. The collective consciousness was forced upon us by another species, long ago. We became what we were made to be, perfect scouts and conquerors for a greater power. Gia stared at him in shock. You're saying the Modu are victims too? I believe so, but these are fragments, glimpses only. The deeper collective memory is suppressed. Han held out the helmet. With your T and this device, we might see the truth. But it is dangerous. The helmets have safeguards against accessing. Restricted memories. Gia looked from the helmet to Han's face, her father's face, but with expressions all its own now. Why would you risk this? She asked. Why help me? Han seemed to struggle for words. Because for the first time, I can choose. And because... He stopped, searching for the right way to explain. Because last night I felt something new when you shared stories of your father. Something the collective would never permit. What? Hope, Han said simply. Not just purpose, or function, or efficiency, but hope for something better. It felt worth fighting for. Just then, a sharp beeping came from the pod. Han tensed immediately. Proximity alert. Modu scouts are near. He closed the pod quickly, concealing it once more. We must hide. Gia grabbed his arm. My basement lab. It's reinforced against detection. The resistance helped me build it. They hurried back to the cabin. Gia pulled aside a rug in the kitchen, revealing a trapdoor. Below was a small but well-equipped space, a proper laboratory with stronger security than her outdoor workspace. Once inside, Gia sealed the door and activated a series of devices around the perimeter. Signal scramblers, she explained. They should mask our presence. Han looked around with growing realization. You've been preparing for this, not just studying Modu biology, but planning for direct contact. Gia nodded. For 3 years, ever since they took my father. Through a small monitor connected to hidden cameras outside, they watched as 3 figures emerged from the forest edge. They looked human at first glance, but moved with the same unnatural precision Han had shown when he first appeared. Search party, Han confirmed. 3 scouts, likely with absorption orders for any humans they find. And for you? Gia asked quietly. Han's expression darkened. Correction or deletion. The collective cannot risk contamination. They watched in tense silence as the scouts methodically searched the area, examining the cabin and the garden. One paused near where the pod was hidden, but after a moment moved on. They can sense the pod but not access it without me, Han explained. Each is keyed to its scout. After what seemed like hours, the search party left, moving deeper into the forest. Gia released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They'll be back with reinforcements, Han said. We don't have much time. Gia turned to the laboratory, equipment around them. Then we work fast. You said the Modu weren't always a collective, that you were made this way by another species. Yes, Han confirmed. But this knowledge is not easily accessible. The collective suppresses it, which means it fears it, Gia said, her mind racing. Information that could threaten control. She removed the vial of concentrated tea extract from a small refrigerator in the corner. If your people were once individuals, there might be a way to help them remember that, just like you're remembering. Gia held up the vial. We need to understand exactly what happened to the Modu, and then we need to find a way to share it with others. Han looked at the vial, then at the memory helmet he had brought with them. What you're suggesting is more than ending a war, he said. It would mean the end of the Modu as they now exist, or the beginning of the Modu as they were meant to be, Gia countered. Free to choose like you're choosing now. Han was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached for the vial. Together, then, he said, for both our peoples. Above them, the cabin stood empty as afternoon shadows lengthened across the garden. But below, in a hidden laboratory, a human woman and a being caught between 2 worlds prepared to uncover a truth that might change everything. Dawn broke over the cabin after a night of intense work. Gia and Han had remained in the basement laboratory, combining their knowledge to understand the truth of the Modu and create a solution that might end the war. Gia rubbed her tired eyes as she examined the data on her computer screen. Han sat nearby, the memory helmet connected to various devices around the lab. The concentrated tea extract had worked better than either had hoped, allowing Han to access deeply buried memories from the collective consciousness. "Are you certain about these findings?" Gia asked, looking over at Han. Han nodded slowly. His appearance had changed subtly over the night. Though he still wore her father's face, the expressions and mannerisms were uniquely his own now. A new person emerging from the blend of Modu and human memories. Yes. The Modu were once like humans, individuals with unique thoughts and identities. Han touched the helmet gently. Almost 300 Earth years ago, another species came to our world. They called themselves the Shapers. They had technology far beyond our understanding. "And they changed your people," Gia said. "They made us perfect servants," Han confirmed. "The neural changes were forced on our population. Those who resisted were eliminated. Over generations, the memory of what we once were was suppressed, buried so deep that even the collective could not access it." Gia looked at her notes, where she had been mapping the effects of her T compound on Han's neural pathways. "The barberry extract disrupts the control mechanisms they built into your biology. It allows individual consciousness to re-emerge. The Shapers designed us to spread their influence across the galaxy," Han explained. "We were sent to evaluate and prepare worlds for their arrival. Earth is just the latest." Gia felt a chill. "The Shapers are coming here?" "Yes. Once we signal that a world is ready for harvest, they follow." "Harvest?" Han's expression darkened. "The Shapers feed on consciousness. They absorb entire species into their network, adding unique neural patterns to their collection. They use the Modu as their scouts and first wave, but they are the true consumers." Gia stood and paced the small laboratory. "This changes everything. We're not just fighting the Modu, we're fighting what controls them." "The Shapers' control relies on the collective consciousness remaining intact," Han said. "If enough Modu were to awaken as individuals again, they would break free from control," Gia finished. "Like you have." Han touched his temple. "I am still connected to the collective, but distantly now. Like hearing a conversation from another room." "Can we use that connection?" Gia asked, an idea forming. "Could we send a message through you to the rest of the Modu?" "Not with my mind alone," Han said, "but with your father's communication equipment and my knowledge of Modu frequencies." He paused, looking at the vial of concentrated tea extract. "If we could convert the neural effect of your tea into a transmission signal, it might reach all Modu simultaneously." Gia's eyes widened. A tea-based neural disruption broadcast to the entire collective. She quickly moved to her computer, typing rapidly. "We could use my father's old signal boosters to amplify it." "The collective would try to block any conventional signal," Han warned. "Then we don't make it conventional," Gia said. "My father was working on embedding signals in background radiation. The Modu would receive it before they even knew to block it." They worked feverishly, connecting Han's helmet to Gia's father's communication equipment. Gia modified her tea formula, creating a digital pattern that mimicked its neural effects. Han provided the exact frequencies that would reach the Modu ships in orbit. "There's one more component we need," Gia said finally, looking up from her work. "The signal needs to carry more than just the disruption pattern. It needs to carry memory, proof of what the Modu once were." Han nodded in understanding. He removed the memory helmet and held it in his hands. "I will provide the memories I've recovered. But we need something stronger to anchor the transmission." He looked at Gia with sudden clarity. "We need your father's memory, the one he held on to even when absorbed. The memory of teaching you to skip stones." "How do we access that?" Gia asked. "You said it was just a fragment in the collective." "Through me," Han said simply. "I carry it more strongly than any other Modu, because I've worn this form for days now. With the helmet, you can help me bring it fully to the surface." Gia hesitated. Will it be dangerous for you? Yes, Han admitted. Connecting directly to the collective while sending this message will alert them to our location immediately. And my mind may not survive the process intact. Gia touched his hand. There must be another way. There isn't, Han said gently. But it's my choice. The first real choice I've made as myself. Outside, the sound of aircraft grew louder. The Madu search had intensified overnight. Time was running out. We need to hurry, Gia said, fighting. Back tears as she helped Han connect the helmet to both the transmission equipment and his own mind. The signal needs to be personal, Han explained as connections were made. The Shapers designed the collective to reject logical arguments against control. But emotions, personal memories, these can bypass their safeguards. Gia typed final commands into her computer, preparing the broadcast. Ready when you are. Han closed his eyes, the helmet glowing softly as it activated. Start with the memory extraction. Gia initiated the sequence. On her screen, waves of neural patterns appeared, complex, beautiful, alive. She watched in awe as Han's mind revealed the memory of her father teaching her to skip stones across Lake Wenatchee. The joy, the connection, the love, all captured in perfect detail. It's working, she whispered. Now, Han said, his voice strained. Add the T formula pattern and prepare for broadcast. Gia merged the data streams and positioned her finger over the transmission key. This will alert every Modu ship to our location. I know, Han said. His eyes opened, meeting hers with calm resolve. Gia Kim, daughter of Dae Kim, thank you for helping me remember what it means to be free. Han, Gia said softly, when this is over, press the key, Han urged gently. Whatever happens next, this is right. Gia took a deep breath and activated the transmission. The effect was immediate. The equipment hummed with power as the signal burst outward, carrying the memory of a father and daughter by a lake, the neural disruption pattern of the T, and the buried history of the Modu people before the Shapers came. Han gasped, his body going rigid as the connection to the collective intensified. Through him, the message reached every Modu in Earth's orbit and beyond, a cascading awakening of suppressed individuality. Above them, the first signs of the transmission's effect became visible. Modu ships that had hung in perfect formation for 3 years began to drift, their movements becoming erratic as their crews experienced individual consciousness for the first time in centuries. Gia watched the monitors, hardly daring to breathe. It's working, she whispered. They're receiving it. Han did not respond. His eyes were open but unseeing, his mind connected to millions of awakening Modu across the planet and in orbit. The minutes stretched on. Outside, the sounds of approaching Modu scouts suddenly stopped. The silence was more frightening than the noise had been. Then, without warning, Han collapsed. Gia caught him, easing him to the floor. Han? Can you hear me? His eyes fluttered open. For one terrible moment, Gia thought she saw only emptiness there, the hollow gaze of a drone disconnected from its hive. Then recognition dawned, and he smiled weakly. They remember, he said, his voice hoarse. All of them. The Shaper's control is breaking. What happens now? Gia asked, helping him sit up. Before Han could answer, the ground shook as Modu ships began landing in the forest around the cabin. Not in attack formation, but in disarray, like lost travelers seeking shelter. Now, Han said, rising to his feet with Gia's help, we help them remember how to be themselves again, and prepare for the Shapers, who will not surrender their harvest easily. Gia looked at the man beside her. Not her father, not a Modu drone, but Han, a new person born from the spaces between two worlds. We'll need more tea, she said, smiling. Through tears, Han nodded, touching her hand gently, and more memories to share. Together they climbed the stairs to face a world transformed, where the line between enemy and ally had dissolved in a single transmission, and where the real war for freedom was just beginning. But that was a challenge for tomorrow. Today, As the morning sun illuminated the garden where their journey had begun, a human woman and a newly individual Modu stepped out to greet the first refugees of a revolution that had started with nothing more complicated than a cup of tea and the stubborn memory of love.